Hello, everybody. I'm here in the Reach, looking off at the throat of the world in the distance. I've spent a few days here in the Reach with my good friend Dirkethus here. I met him in the town of Darkwater Crossing, where I rescued him from some farmer. Going to part ways with him now, but we get together every few months or so to go on an adventure, so it won't be long before I see him again. I'm going to take this next stage of my journey alone as I travel through Skyrim's southwesternmost hold. And there's Fort Sungard, a bastion currently occupied by the Reachmen, a group of native Bretons who have fought with the Nords and the Empire for countless years over control of the Reach. I'm thinking I'll talk about their history while we walk today. They are fascinating people. And, there goes Dirkethus. Off to make his way home, I suppose. So the Reach is a mountainous, hilly region, as you can see here. It borders Falkreath, Whiterun, Hjalmarch, Holds, and would you look at that sunrise? Skyrim's natural beauty is really unlike anything else in Tamriel. So let's start making our way west. One of my contacts got in touch about a book that I've been searching for. An incredibly valuable edition of A Game at Dinner, a printing of a letter documenting the events of a deadly dinner party hosted by the Dunmer King, then Prince Helseth of House Hlalu. Prince Helseth and his mother, the somewhat infamous Queen Baronzaya, ordered the first copies of the book themselves, and these first editions have all but disappeared in the intervening centuries. This tome will be a crown jewel of my collection if I can get my hands on it. Looks like Dirkethus killed a saber cat there, keeping the roads safe. And here we can see one of the most incredible ancient Nord ruins, for my money anyways. Lost Valley Redoubt. You can see it prominently features water features like aqueducts and waterfalls. At the top of the ruins is Bard's Leap Summit, a promontory bridge that extends out over an artificial pool far below. And historically, brave or foolish folks would leap from that summit into the pool. And there's the sign for Karthwasten. That's where we're heading. That's where my contact is, who will put me in touch with whoever it is that can get me this book. Alright. I guess this orc is not very polite to other travelers on the road. Okay, she's... yep, alright. Well, we'll just have to teach her a little lesson about politeness. Go cool off in the river for a bit. And don't start fights with random people on the road. Very rude. So, the Reach is one of Skyrim's 9 holds. It's rocky and hilly and mountainous, as I said, and so you can imagine it makes for very poor farmland. But the mines of the Reach richly give up silver and other valuable minerals. The hold's capital is Markarth, a retrofitted ancient Dwemer city. Oh, look at those mud crabs. Lovely creatures. The Reach is one of the more dangerous holds in Skyrim at the moment. For, in addition to Skyrim's ordinary dangers and the instability of the Civil War, the Reach's hills and crags all host encampments of Reachmen who have a kill-on-sight attitude towards most outsiders. And I said I would ramble a bit about the lore of the Reachmen as we make our way to Karthwaste and their history, their culture, their religion. So, let's see. They're one of Tamriel's oldest cultures. They've outlived many more prominent ones, such as the Dwemer and the Snow Elves. And although, they kind of contain multitudes within themselves, the Reachmen are not a unified culture. They've historically been a collection of clans, not one unified people. Although at the moment they are fairly unified against. And it's goodbye to this saber cat. Send that down into the river. At the moment they're kind of, fighting in lockstep with one another. Sort of standing together against a common enemy, you might say. And as common enemies so often do, they take groups of people who might be antagonistic at the best of times and turn them into at least temporary allies. We're going to go down that road, but let's just walk out here for a minute. This is a great example of the beauties of the Reach here. Just this vista all around us. The ancient Nord ruins, the crags, the rocks, the mountains. There's something about the landscape of the Reach that really just speaks to my soul. I'd love to live here if times were more peaceful. But the Reachmen, they draw their heritage to the earliest Atmoran immigrants. And historically, they've claimed homelands in both the western end of Skyrim and the eastern end of High Rock. The Skyrim area is called the Reach, and the High Rock area is called the Western Reach. Although, of course, to the Reachmen, historically, those borders mean very little to them. The Reachmen history overall is really, more than anything else, a history of fighting against foreign invaders for their ancestral land. They've been repeatedly nearly crushed by outsiders, and yet they have survived for thousands of years in a frequent state of defensive wars, rebellions, and guerrilla fighting against occupying forces. Interestingly, their religious beliefs align quite neatly with this state of things, as they are grateful for hardships. They see hardships as sort of a forge that refines you into a stronger person. Religiously, they believe in two planes of existence. There's the world of flesh and the world of spirit. According to the Reachmen, only the world of spirit existed in the past. But then the being Lork, the god Lork, which is the Reachmen's name for the trickster deity that appears in many mythologies across Tamriel. We have some Forsworn here, some Reachmen. But Lork looked at Namira's, the Daedric Prince Namira's, cosmic darkness, and saw potential there. And he ended up sacrificing himself to create the world of flesh. So the Reachmen believe that Namira rules the spirit realm, and that after Lork sacrificed himself to create the physical realm, the Daedric Prince Helseth took over that plane and oversees it. And the Reachmen often see their gods as teaching them or refining them. You know, sometimes the gods of the Reachmen almost feel like lessons more than actual entities. Helseth teaches the Reachmen to be clever and strong through his beasts. Periite sends them disease, which only strengthens those who survive. Molag Bal sends suffering in all forms, but, you know, again, these pains teach the Reachmen to endure hardship. And so on with all of the Reachmen's deities. And these lessons have undoubtedly worked, for the folk of the Reach have survived longer than one might expect, you know, considering the troubles that they faced over their long history, the constant stream of empires and outsiders trying to conquer their land. And, you know, these events have nearly brought the Reachmen to total collapse at various points. For instance, when the First Empire, the Alessian Empire, conquered the Reach. And if you've heard of Red Eagle, the Reachman hero Red Eagle, it was during this war that Red Eagle led his rebellion against the Imperials. And Red Eagle also is likely the first Briarheart, which is a powerful class of Reachman warrior created by hag ravens, these horrid witches who live in the Reach and often ally with the Reachmen. What's kind of interesting about the Briarhearts is that they lose their hearts, which sort of parallels how Lork, in other mythologies, Lorkhan as he's called, had to lose his heart in the creation of the physical world. So just like Lork, the Briarhearts are sacrificing their heart for the sake of their people. Now the Reachmen have also had incredible successes. In fact, there was a brief period of time in the Second Era where the Reachmen actually conquered the imperial city of all things, and installed Dukharak, the Black Drake, as the first of the so-called Longhouse Emperors, which were 3 emperors of Reachman blood. The Emperor Leovic legalized Daedra worship, and that was the end of him, as it was so unpopular that it initiated the rebellion which would lead to the end of the Longhouse dynasty. But here we are at Karthwasten. So let's go find my contact. He's a Reach guard posted in town, and should be able to find him standing watch at the local mine. So I'll head there first. Karthwasten is one of the many mining communities in the Reach. And there he is. Now, of course he's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart, and I'm going to be paying out of the nose for this. A handful of diamonds is the agreed-upon price, but for this book, that's a deal that I'm willing to make. So, I'll hand over 5 diamonds to him should be enough. Now let's hear what he has to tell me. All right. I got what I needed from him. Apparently, he's got a friend working in Markarth, working with some scholar or wizard or somebody, a rival collector by the sounds of it. This friend worked in this guy's personal museum and has been looking for the right buyer to come along so he could steal something juicy from the collection, grab a quick payday, and flee the city. My contact arranged it all. Apparently, the thief has already fled the city, long gone, too scared of his boss's retribution. But he left the book at a dead drop. The book is on a tower at the entrance to the old dwarven ruins under Markarth, sitting on a stone chair facing the rock wall. So, I'm going to hurry over there and pick up this book before somebody stumbles across it. Although the ruins are not heavily trafficked, so it seems like a fairly secure location. But let me return to the Reachmen. If you've visited the Reach these days, you will have heard these folk called the Forsworn, not the Reachmen. And this is a recent change, instigated by the upheaval of the Great War between the Empire and the Altmeri Dominion. During that war, the Emperor pulled many of the provincial legions back to the home province of Cyrodiil, which left the provinces underdefended, an opening that the Reachmen took advantage of. They conquered the Reach and founded a kingdom based out of Markarth. An incredible victory for the Reachmen, as they had finally taken back their homeland. Now this short-lived Reachmen kingdom is quite controversial. Some claim that it was largely just and organized, although it took retribution on the worst of the Nord landlords who had treated the native Reachmen the worst. But apparently the kingdom was even making overtures to the Empire, trying to seek official recognition. Others claim that it was a chaotic uprising. But regardless of the truth, the Empire had no ability to do anything about it, given the state of the world at the time and their engagement in the Great War, so the ousted Jarl Hrolftir of Markarth turned to the powerful Ulfric Stormcloak and his militia to reclaim the city, promising free Talos worship if they succeeded. And of course, Ulfric, with his mastery of the Thu'um and his militia, succeeded against the Reachmen, and he brutally massacred everybody who had fought against him, even those who had surrendered. He even killed civilians who had refused to fight for him, including shopkeepers, farmers, and even children just old enough to hold a sword. The worst of these stories might be exaggerations by Imperial loyalists. It's hard to say, but even some Stormcloak sympathizers in Markarth admit that Ulfric and his men went too far in retaking the Reach. But let's take a break from the history lesson, as it seems the Khajiit caravan is here. And curiously, there's a dead body here. That's unfortunate. Seems like a tragedy unfolded here. I don't know how this happened. Anyway, I'm a friend of Rhysad here, and he keeps me supplied with a few choice items. In particular, skooma, which is illegal in the province, although the chaos of the war has led to very little enforcement of anti-skooma laws. I wouldn't recommend the stuff, as it's quite addictive, and I must admit that I have a bit of an unhealthy relationship with the stuff. here in Skyrim, the skooma is very weak for some reason. Some people say it's watered down. Regardless, it's certainly not as potent as the skooma that you find in Cyrodiil or Morrowind. But either way, it hits the spot a little bit. You know, before we head into Markarth, I think I just need to have a little bit, just to scratch that itch. It's been too long, and I've been a little jittery for the stuff. So, let's just take a rest under this bridge and have a couple bottles of skooma, and we'll be back into Markarth in no time. Though I'm feeling a little strange. Maybe there's no hurry. Oh, what time is it? What happened? It's so bright. It looks like it's morning. I guess I slept under that bridge all night. And I seem to have lost my clothes. That's embarrassing. Oh, here are my gauntlets. Let's get those on. Not the highest priority, but oh, there's my boots. Left up on the bridge. Thankfully nobody came along and took those. Let's get those back on. Of course, if I can't find my cuirass and my greaves, it's going to be a somewhat embarrassing entrance into the city. Here's a helmet. Again, not the highest priority item, but alright. I don't see anybody. Hopefully I can just oh, there we go. Here's the rest of my armor. Alright. Well, that, my friends, is why you shouldn't drink skooma. It's too late for me to quit the stuff. It's got its hooks pretty deep in me. But you should all avoid it like the plague if you can. Anyway, as we finish our walk into Markarth, I'll finish our little history lesson. So, when we left off, Ulfric Stormcloak had just retaken Markarth for Jarl Hrolfdir in exchange for having free worship of Talos in the Reach. Well, of course, once the Thalmor of the Aldmeri Dominion found out about this, heads were going to roll, as they had banned Talos worship in the Empire as part of the conditions of ending the Great War. The Empire tried to keep things quiet for a time, but the High Elves found out, and sure enough demanded a stop to it. To avoid restarting the Great War, the Empire and Markarth's Jarl arrested Ulfric. This event would come to be known as the Markarth Incident, and it is what kicked off Skyrim's civil war, as Ulfric and his rebels turned against the Imperials who had jailed him. And as for the Reachmen who had been kicked out by Ulfric, they took on the name of the Forsworn, a reference to the fact that they have, in practice, though not in spirit of course, forsworn their homeland. Their native reach is under the control of outsiders, and until they take it back, they will remain the Forsworn. So, that's our little lesson on the Reachmen. I hope you learned a thing or two, or at least found it entertaining to listen to the ramblings of an old Argonian hungover from Skooma. You look at Markarth. This city is really something special. Obviously, the architecture here, you can see, is quite different from the rest of Skyrim. there's Sidna Mine down there to the right. And the Silverblood family owns that place. They use prison labor to mine silver. And, speaking of the Forsworn, I've heard rumors that the Forsworn king is alive down there in the mine, that he smuggles his orders out of prison and is essentially commanding his Forsworn armies still. But here is Understone Keep. That's where the entrance to Nishwan-Zel is, the Dwemer ruins under the city. And that's where the dead drop is for the book. So, hopefully, it will be there, and I won't have wasted a bunch of diamonds on this escapade. Understone Keep. You can see all of the Dwemer fixtures of brass, the steam vents, and all the arcane mechanical instruments. Their magic is unlike anything in Tamriel today. Their technology, their knowledge really surpasses anything that we have across the continent. Up here, although the Jarl is not at his throne at the moment, this is the mournful throne, currently occupied by Jarl Igmund, who is the son of Jarl Hrolfdir, the man who made the deal with Ulfric to kick out the Forsworn. Later, the Forsworn killed Jarl Hrolfdir, and Igmund ascended to become the new Jarl. He deals with many issues in his city, not the least of which is his conflict with the disloyal Silverbloods. That was a dwarven centurion, one of the Dwemer automatons. They're sort of miraculous constructs powered by steam and magic that defend their cities. Dwarven centurions are the greatest of the Dwemer automatons. Very dangerous. You can see a couple more here. These are dwarven spheres. They roll up into a little ball and roll around. This is the entrance to Nishwan-Zel, an excavation site. That's the ruins of the old Dwemer city, and it's currently being excavated by Calselmo down there. You can see him in his robes. He's one of the foremost experts on Dwemer history and culture. Although I've heard that his excavation has run into a snag recently. A giant frostbite spider that the guards called Nimmy is preventing the excavation team from doing their work in Nishwan-Zel. But anyway, my contact told me that the book should be on the stone chair facing the rock wall. And sure enough, here it is, a first edition of A Game at Dinner. So this is such a valuable copy, as I said, because Queen Berenziah and Prince Helseth printed the original run themselves, despite the fact that the story told within essentially accuses Prince Helseth of being a murderer. However, if you know the cunning of Berenziah and Helseth, you can understand why they thought this might be to their advantage to have Helseth have such a reputation. Now, this is an original first edition, but It also has a publisher's note that was included with later copies. The note itself is a later addition into this book, but, the book is printed with this note in all the editions that run today, so the book isn't really complete without it. Markarth. It really is a miraculous city. Here in this mountain crag, the water running down through it, making all this ancient Dwemer architecture slick with water. The combination of the natural stone with the carvings of the old dwarves. It's a sight to behold. So before I sleep off my Skooma hangover, I'm going to go into my house here. I keep a private apartment called Vlindrel Hall here in Markarth. And there's my house Carl. He keeps the place tidy for me while I'm away. So, let's come in here, get comfortable by the fire. And this is my bedroom. I think I'll take a nap in here after I'm finished. But let's grab some mead, some nice Blackbriar mead. Have a seat. And go ahead and drink a little bit. And let's crack into a game at dinner. A Game at Dinner by an Anonymous Spy. Foreword from the publisher. The history behind this letter is almost as interesting and dark as the story it tells. The original letter to the mysterious Downane was copied and began circulating around the ashlands of Ardenfell a few months ago. In time, a print found its way to the mainland, and Prince Hlalu Helseth's palace outside Almalexia. While the reader may conclude after reading this letter that the prince would be furious about such a work, impugning his highness with great malevolence, quite the reverse was true. The prince and his mother, Queen Berenzia, had it privately printed into bound copies and sent to libraries and booksellers throughout Morrowind. As a matter of record, the prince and the queen have not officially stated whether the letter is a work of pure imagination or based on an actual occurrence. The house dress has publicly denounced the work, and indeed no one named Downane, despite the suggestions in the letter, has ever been linked to the house. We leave the reader to interpret the letter as he or she believes. Neriscan, Publisher. Dark Liege Downane. You asked for a detailed description of my experience last night, and the reasons for my plea to house dress for another assignment. I hope I have served you well in my capacity as informant in the court of Prince Helseth, a man who I have stated in many previous reports could teach Molag Bal how to scheme. As you know, I've spent nearly a year now working my way into his inner circle of advisors. He was in need of friendship when he first arrived in Morrowind, and eagerly took to me and a few others. Still, he was disinclined to trust any of us, which is perhaps not surprising, given his tenuous position in Morrowind's society. For your unholiness's recollection, the prince is the eldest son of Berenzia, who was once the queen of Morrowind, and once the queen of the High Rock Kingdom of Wayrest. At the death of her husband, Prince Helseth's stepfather, King Edwyre, there was a power struggle between the prince and Edwyre's daughter, the Princess Elisana. Though details of what transpired are imperfect, it is clear that Elisana won the battle and became queen, banishing Helseth and Baronzaya. Baronzaya's only other child, Morgaya, had already left court to marry and become queen of the Somerset Isle kingdom of Firsthold. Baronzaya and Helseth crossed the continent to return to Morrowind only last year. They were well received by Baronzaya's uncle, our current king, Hlalu Athin Lethin, who had taken the throne after Baronzaya's abdication more than 40 years ago. Baronzaya made it clear that she had no designs on reclaiming the throne, but merely to retire to her family estates. Helseth, as you know, has lingered in the royal court, and many have whispered that while he lost the throne of Wayrest, he does not intend to lose the throne of Morrowind at Lethin's death. I have kept your Unholiness informed of the prince's movements, meetings, and plots, as well as the names and characters of his other advisors. As you may recall, I've often thought that I was not the only spy in Helseth's court. I told you before that a particular Dunmer councillor of Helseth looked like a fellow I had seen in the company of Tholar Serioni, the arch-canon of the Tribunal Temple. Another, a young Nordwoman, has been verified to visit the Imperial Fortress in Balmora. Of course, in their cases, they might well have been on Helseth's own business, but I couldn't be certain. I had begun to think myself paranoid, as the prince himself, when I found myself doubting the sincere loyalty of the prince's chamberlain, Burgess, a Breton who had been in his employ since his days in the court of Wayrest. That is the background on that night, last night. Yesterday morning, I received a curt invitation to dine with the prince. Based only on my own paranoia, I dispatched one of my servants, who is a good and loyal servant of the House Dress, to watch the palace and report back anything unusual. Just before dinner, he returned and told me what he had witnessed. A man, cloaked in rags, had been given entrance into the palace, and had stayed there for some time. When he left, my servant saw his face beneath the cloak, an alchemist of infamous repute, said to be a leading supplier of exotic poisons. A fine observer, my servant also noticed that the alchemist entered the palace smelling of wickweed, bittergreen, and something alien and sweet. When he left, he was odorless. He had come to the same conclusion as I did, and the prince had procured ingredients to prepare a poison. Bittergreen alone is deadly when eaten raw, but the other ingredients suggested something far deeper. As your Unholiness can doubtless imagine, I went to dinner that night prepared for any eventuality. All of Prince Helseth's other councillors were in attendance, and I noticed that all were slightly apprehensive. Of course, I imagined that I was in a nest of spies, and all knew of the prince's mysterious meeting. It is just as likely that some knew of the alchemist's visit, while others were simply concerned by the nature of the prince's invitation, and still others merely unconsciously adopted the tense disposition of their fellow, better informed councillors. The prince, however, was in fine mettle, and soon had everyone relaxed and at ease. At 9, we were all ushered into his dining hall, where the feast had been laid out. And what a feast! Honeyed gourd apples, fragrant stews, roasts in various blood sauces, and every variety of fish and fowl expertly and ostentatiously prepared. Crystal and gold flagons of wine, Flynn, Sheen, and Mast were at our seats to be savoured as appropriate with each course. As tantalizing as the aromas were, it occurred to me that in such a maze of spices and flavors, a discreet poison would be undetectable. Throughout the meal, I maintained the illusion of eating the food and drinking the liquor, but I was surreptitious and swallowed nothing. Finally, the plates and food were cleared from the table, and a tureen of spicy broth was placed in the center of the banquet. The servant who brought it then retired, closing the banquet hall door behind him. "It smells divine, my prince," said the Marchioness Colgar, the Nord woman, "but I cannot eat another thing." Your Highness, I added, feigning a tone of friendliness and slight intoxication, you know that every one at this table would gladly die to put you on the throne of Morrowind, but is it really necessary that we gorge ourselves to death? The others at the table agreed with appreciative groans. Prince Helseth smiled. I swear by Vermina the Gifter, my dark liege, even you have never seen a smile such as this one. Ironic words. You see, an alchemist visited me today. As some of you already doubtless know, he showed me how to make a marvelous poison and its antidote, a most potent potion, excellent for my purposes. No restoration spell will aid you once you've ingested it. Only the antidote in the tureen will save you from certain death. And what a death! From what I've heard, I am eager to see if the effects are all that the alchemist promised. It should be horribly painful for the afflicted, but quite entertaining. No one said a word. I could feel my heart beating hard in my chest. Your Highness, said Alarat, the Dunmer I suspected of alliance with the temple, have you poisoned someone at this table? You are very astute, Alarat, said Prince Helseth, looking about the table, eyeing each of his advisers carefully. Little wonder I value your counsel, as indeed I value all in this room. It would be perhaps easiest for me to say who I haven't poisoned. I haven't poisoned any who serve but one master, any whose loyalty to me is sincere. I haven't poisoned any person who wants to see King Helseth on the throne of Morrowind. I haven't poisoned anyone who isn't a spy for the Empire, the Temple, the House of Telvanni, the House of Redoran, the House of Indorel, or the House of Dress. Your Unholiness, he looked directly at me at his last words. I know that in certainty. My face is practiced at keeping my thoughts from showing, but I immediately thought of every secret meeting I've had, every coded message I sent to you and the house, my dark liege. What could he know? What could he, even without knowing, suspect? I felt my heart beating even faster. Was it fear or poison? I couldn't speak, certain as I was that my voice would betray my calm facade. Those loyal to me who wish harm on my enemies may be wondering, how can I be certain that the poison has been ingested? Is it possible that the guilty party, or dare I say, parties, were suspicious and merely pretended to eat and drink tonight? Of course. But even the craftiest of pretenders would have to raise a glass to his or her lips and put empty forks or spoons in their mouths to play the charade. The food, you see, was not poisoned. The cups and cutlery were. If you did not partake out of fear, you're poisoned just the same, and, sadly, missed an excellent roast. Sweat beaded on my face, and I turned from the prince so he would not see. My fellow advisers, all of them, were frozen in their seats, from the Marchioness Clogar, white with fear, to Kima Ineb, visibly shaking, from the furrowed, angry brow of Alarat to the statue-like stare of Burgess. I couldn't help thinking then, could the prince's entire councillorship be comprised of nothing but spies? Was there any person at the table loyal? And then I thought, what if I were not a spy myself? Would I trust Helseth to know that? No one knows better than his advisers both the depth of the prince's paranoia and the utter implacability of his ambition. If I were not a spy for the House Dress, even then would I be safe? Could a loyalist be poisoned because of a not-so-innocent misjudgment? The others must have been thinking the same, loyalists and spies alike. While my mind whirled, I could hear the prince's voice, addressing all assembled. The poison acts quickly. If the antidote is not taken within 1 minute from now, here will be death at the table. I couldn't decide whether I'd been poisoned or not. My stomach ached, but I reminded myself it might have been the result of sitting at a sumptuous banquet and not partaking. My heart shook in my chest, and a bitter taste like trauma root stung my lips. Again, was it fear poisoned. These are the last words you will hear if you are disloyal to me, said Prince Helseth, still smiling that damned smile as he watched his advisors squirming in their seats. Take the antidote and live. Could I believe him? I thought of what I knew of the prince and his character. Would he kill a self-possessed spy at his court, or would he rather send the vanquished back to his masters? The prince was ruthless, but either possibility was within his manner. Surely the theatricality of this whole dinner was meant to be a presentation to instill fear. What would my ancestors say if I joined them after sitting at a table, eventually dying of poison? What would they say if I took the antidote, confessing my allegiance to you and the house dress, and was summarily executed? And, I confess, I thought of what you might do to me even after I was dead. I had grown so lightheaded and filled with my own thoughts that I didn't see Burgess jump from his seat. I was only suddenly aware that he had the tureen in his hands and was gulping down the liquid within. There were guards all around, though I never noticed them entering. Burgess, said Prince Helseth, still smiling, you have spent some time at Ghostgate. How's Redoran? You didn't know. Burgess laughed sourly. No, House. I report to your stepsister, the Queen of Wayrest. I've always been in her employ. By Akatosh, you poisoned me because you thought I was working for some damnable dark elves. You're half right, said the prince. I didn't guess who you were working for, or even that you were a spy. But you're also wrong about me poisoning you. You poisoned yourself when you drank from the tureen. Your Unholiness, you don't need to hear how Burgess died. I know that you have seen much over the many, many years of your existence, but you truly don't want to know. I wish I could erase the memory of his agonies from my own mind. The council was dismissed shortly thereafter. I do not know if Prince Helseth knows or suspects that I too am a spy. I do not know how many others last night, were as close as I was, from drinking from the tureen before Burgess did. I only know that if the prince does not suspect me now, he will. I cannot win at the games he mastered long ago at the court of Wayrest, and I beg your Unholiness, my dark liege Dalnane, to use your influence in the house dress and dismiss your loyal servant from this charge. Publisher's note. Of course, the anonymous writer's signature has not been on any reprint of the letter since the original. And that is A Game at Dinner. A fun little tale of Helseth's machinations. Of course, we don't know if it's true or not, but it's a good story, and at the very least, this is a very valuable book. It's going to be absolutely a prize in my collection. But I'm going to get ready for bed here, because my head is pounding from the skooma. Maybe I need to have a bit of the hair of the dog that bit me. But until next time, my friends, I'm going to get some rest, and I hope that you will too. Take care, and goodbye.